listened to Jimmy Anderson yesterday, who gave his final farewell press conference. He was asked that very question really about the future bowlers, how will they see things, and he's an old romantic as well. He's a player of a certain time and type, but he says nothing has given him more pleasure than playing Test cricket, the graft and the grind and the lessons that you learn along the way.
So we've spoken over the last couple of years, Athers, and there's been this great optimism around English cricket, Bazball, World Cups, and then we did all right in the Ashes. We didn't do very well in India. We didn't do that well we did all right in the 2020 World Cup. Is it fair to say that massive optimism around English cricket has just been tempered slightly over the last year or so? Is that fair, do you think?
It's probably fair. Yeah, I mean, there was this great rush of optimism, as you suggest, after Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum took over, and they did brilliantly in the first, 15 Test matches with the Test team. It's dropped off a little bit, and they're currently near the bottom of the Test Championship, which reflects a little bit what went on before that. That's a broader context, but it feels like it's a little bit of a reboot. Now we've had a 4-month break from Test cricket, 4 months since England last played in India. They've made 1 or 2 changes. They've obviously going to be moving Jimmy Anderson on after this Test. They've moved Johnny Bairstow on, Ollie Robinson. So they're trying to it's not a fundamental overhaul, but they're just looking at the bowling in particular with a view to what's coming up, perhaps 12, 18 months' time, and looking to slightly reboot things.
Is that Bairstow done as a Test player, do you think, then? Because he's one of those figures who...
Ben Stokes said he's not shutting the door on him, but at 34, when you get left out of the Test team, not too many people come back after that point in time. And you mentioned the one-day squad as well. They just finished the T20 World Cup, so there's be a natural turnover of one-day cricketers as well. So it feels to me like it's got to that stage. But Johnny Bairstow is a particular kind of character that you write off at your peril. But he's one of a number of changes that they've made to this Test team.
Tell us about Jamie Smith, the wicketkeeper, because he seems to have come out of nowhere. Maybe that was me not reading these things carefully, but it wasn't an obvious succession plan that I'd ever heard of.
Well, he was one of a number that they were looking at. There's a chap called Ollie Robinson, not the bowler Ollie Robinson, but a wicketkeeper batter up at Durham, who's been doing very well. And obviously Ben Foakes was the incumbent. And then you have Johnny Bairstow as well. They plumped for Jamie Smith, I think, just because of the potential that they see in him. First of all, as a batter, he's an exceptional young batter with a sky-high ceiling, really. The wicket-keeping is more the kind of talking point, given that he doesn't do it for his county. Sorry, Ben Foakes is the incumbent wicket-keeper there. Jamie Smith is competent wicket-keeper, but he is the number 2 to Foakes at Surrey. And England selectors have decided that they want to switch that around and make him their number 1 keeper here. It's a little bit like Shoaib Bashir, who's the number 2 spinner at Somerset, and England have plumped for him as their number 1 spinner here. So they go against the grain of what's seen sometimes in county cricket, but selectors are allowed to do that. They're allowed to make their own judgments.
Shoaib Bashir is an interesting character as well, in that he did all right in India, but that's the place to go if you're a spinner. Doesn't do that much in English conditions. His average is pretty high. Is that where they're saying we see something different? So the point that you're making, that this is about the ceiling being high rather than the floor being high. Is that what they look for in these type of situations?
Yeah, they're looking for potential. Obviously, with younger players, there's a kind of growth potential there, and they perceive, particularly with Jamie Smith, I think that his ceiling is very high. Bashir is a reflection partly on the absence of choice or the paucity of choice in English cricket when it comes to spinners. He did very well in India. He went to India on the back of only half a dozen first-class games. He'd hardly played at all, and given that, he did very well there. And they just see him. They plump for him now as their number 1 spinner. As I say, they're not flush with choice around the county game, but they have to have a spinner. You can't go into a 5-day game without a spinner. Generally, you can't. You certainly can't do that abroad. And so they need to back somebody. And they see in Bashir, he's tall, he's accurate, he spins the ball and showed in India that he's got very good temperament.
Do we need to worry a little bit about the bowling attack when we look at this English team? Because as you say, the batting lineup outside of Bairstow is the same. It's the batting, it's the destructive batting lineup that did so well a couple of years ago. It's the Bazball lineup really, and if Stokes is fit, Crawley has really got touch recently. A great opening partnership. You can imagine this being a very Brook, one of the best players in the world. That's a very strong batting lineup, and you go from that. You pivot on a wicket keeper that could go in any direction, really. And then you look at the bowling. Anderson's gone after the first test. Broad has gone. How exciting. Wokes is pretty old. What are we saying about this bowling attack? Is there a tone of this bowling attack that you can see?
Well, that's what they're concerned about. I think you're absolutely right to say that they're pretty happy with the batting, or if the batting fires and plays to its potential, then they see a very solid top seven there, including the wicketkeeper. But the bowling is more problematic. Broad, as you say, has moved on. Anderson, they are moving on. Wokes is not a spring chicken anymore. So they're looking at the next generation of bowlers. And that's really why they're moving Anderson on, because they want to get some overs and experience into the legs of young bowlers like Gus Atkinson, who make his debut tomorrow. Josh Tong, when he comes back from injury, they'll hope to get Jofra Archer back playing red ball and test ball cricket next year.
Do you think he will?
So
do you think he will, Jofra?
Well,
I mean, if I were him,
that is $1 million question. Really, he's an exceptional talent, but he's been very injury prone, and they've had a very softly approach with him to try and get him back into the T20 World Cup, which he got through absolutely fine. But it's very different bowling 4 overs occasionally to bowling 3 or 4 spells a day. Over a 5-day game, over a 5 test match series, which is what England will be doing next summer against India, and then the following winter against Australia. Fingers are crossed, because at his best, Jofra Archer is a huge asset, would be a huge asset to any team. He's fast, is accurate, very skillful, and that's what you need in tough conditions in Australia, for example.
If you were his agent or his friend or his dad or something like that, would you say to him, when we look at the cricket world, you could go off and earn £1 million in the IPL. You could then play the 100. You could do a little bit in the Australian one if you wanted to. You could then play white ball cricket for England. You'll only ever bowl 3 or 4 overs at any one time. You'll make a lot of money. You'll still have international recognition. I just wonder, apart from old romantics, of which I count myself as one.
Me too.
Would anyone actually tell Jofra Archer to try and play a series in India than a series in Australia? I just don't.
Well, the point you make is a very valid one, and of course that's one of the key debates in the game right now. That all the market forces and everything really is pushing players towards playing one format. Shorter format is less tiring, it's less grueling, it's more rewarding, it's more lucrative. But just to listen to Jimmy Anderson yesterday, who gave his final farewell press conference, he was asked that very question really about the future bowlers, how will they see things, and he's an old romantic as well. He's a player of a certain time and type, but he says nothing has given him more pleasure than playing Test cricket, the graft and the grind and the lessons that you learn along the way. So I hope that there's a place for fine bowlers like Jofra Archer in Test cricket, but they have to make that decision, not me.
What was Jimmy Anderson like when he was younger? You played in the same county as him, didn't you? Did he ever bowl to you?
Very briefly. That's aging him and me. Yeah. I mean, I finished in 2001 at Lancashire, and it was just about his first season. He might have joined in 2000, but we crossed over very briefly at Lancashire. I didn't know him well then because I was away playing with England, but he came to Old Trafford. He was very raw. Fast, sharp, but very unpredictable and a bit all over the hockey, and has become, if not England's finest ever swing and seam bowler, then certainly one of them, finishing with a remarkable career record, really, 21 years later after he made his Test debut in 2003 and 700 wickets, the most by any fast bowler in the history of the game. So it's been a great story. Clearly, people like me who are from Lancashire, we're very... feel very strongly about what he's done and what a good player he's been.
Talk briefly about the West Indies. Before we start this current team, when I was growing up watching you, Athers, the West Indies were the thing that you got most excited about really in cricket. Mainly, I think by that point, it became with Lara the bat. When Lara came in, it was the bat. But before him, it was the bowlers. And you always thought this idea of Curtly Ambrose and Courtney Walsh. That was my generation. They were the fast bowlers before that as well. What was that like? You opening the batting, trudging out on a hot day, knowing that they were going to be screaming the ball at you. What was that West Indian cricket? The fear of the fast bowlers, was that what you think of when you think back to that?
Yes, I mean they were a great and charismatic team throughout the 1980s when I was kind of growing up, really in my teenage years and starting to follow the game. And then when I played against them for the first time, which was in 1991, they were the team that you feared. I can well remember playing against them for the first time Test match at Headingley in 1991, and they just had this aura and charisma. They were a great team. I think the first attack that I played against was Marshall, Patterson, Ambrose, and Walsh. And you've got to play well to get runs against that lot. But it had great batters as well: Greenwich, Haynes, Richards. I mean, fantastic team, and played a brand of cricket that was the baseball of its day, I suppose. So they've gone inevitably. I think they've gone through. That was an unbelievable period for about 20 years or thereabouts. But given the resources, the population of the Caribbean, there's always talent there. But it would be unrealistic to expect, I think, a team like that to just carry on dominating forevermore. That was not going to happen. But the decline was rather steeper and sadder than people imagined. Looking at this team, they suffer from some of the things that you were talking about before, that a lot of their batters, for example, people like Nicholas Pooran and Shai Hope, looking to play franchise cricket, T20 cricket, that's where it's lucrative, and that's where they've chosen to, focus their talents. But they've got a very good and promising bowling attack here. There's a young fella called Shamar Joseph who bowled them to victory in Brisbane at the start of 2024, and is from this remote village in Guyana. It's a great story. Alzari Joseph from Antigua is very promising. Jaden Seals, who's been playing for Sussex in the Championship. So they've got a bowling attack that could really threaten and challenge England. The issue for them is their batting, with the exception of Craig Brathwaite, their captain. They're very, very inexperienced, both in Test cricket and in particular in English cricket. There was a time when a lot of West Indian players would come and play county cricket and get that experience of English conditions in county cricket. It doesn't happen so much now. So the top order, with the exception of Brathwaite, is pretty inexperienced in English conditions.
So then what do you reckon will happen? Jimmy Anderson, you'd like him to win on his last game. He's playing the first Test only at Lords, isn't he? But what do you think where will the series go, do you think?
Well, England will be favourites just because of home advantage, because of that inexperienced batting that I mentioned. But I mentioned that West Indies won a Test match in Brisbane, at the start of 2024. They drew in Australia. That's more than England have managed over the decade or more. England last won a Test match in Australia about 2011. So, don't underestimate West Indies, in particular their bowlers. Obviously, I hope Jimmy Anderson finishes with a bang. He needs 9 wickets to go past Shane Warne. So at the moment, he's third in the all-time takers list. And he needs 9 to go past Shane Warne, who I think finished on 708. Jimmy's on 700. So that would be his perfect ending. Perfect endings don't happen that frequently in sport, but that would be his.
My son is a massive Anderson fan. He's going tomorrow to Lords, first day at Lords, with his Trinidadian grandma. So he'll be there. She'll be wearing a West Indies hat, and he'll be supporting Jimmy Anderson. So I hope he gets a good day's cricket, Athers, and it'll be good. And he just wants to see Anderson get some wickets.
Well, as do we all. I mean, I'm sat at Lords now. It's looking pretty overcast, and the pitch is covered and got a bit of grass on it. So were it being played today, these are perfect Anderson conditions. They may well be there tomorrow as well.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Great to speak to you, Mike. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Pleasure, Stig.